Production support for Hot and Cold is brought to you by American Solar Technics, manufacturers of components for wood burning and solar heating systems. Hey, I'm Tom Gozzi. This week on Hot and Cold, we're getting ready to do our kitchen cabinets. They have landed in the state of Maine, and that means only one thing: we have to be ready for them when they get here. And there's the last minute things. We got to do them. Stay with us. We'll do them. So here we are in the kitchen of our project house again, and we're wrapping things up. I've been struggling with getting the floor down and working around traffic patterns, and all the floor is down except for a few little spots. We've got all the area by the kitchen cabinets done, and the only place I haven't done is way back over here. If I get the cameraman to just swing around a little bit. We're stopping here for a reason. I'm going to move the shoes out of the way because right here we have a step that goes down, and what we're going to do is, I think we're going to, the doorway's over there, we're going to take the doorway out, we're going to elevate this up so this is the same plane as that, and this step doesn't need to be here. It was a rehab that was done many years ago, and we're going to change that around so it's one flat surface all the way out. Why? Because it's there and I don't want to have to try to tile a ramp that goes down. So that'll happen sometime. It's not mission critical. We can let that go. The tiles, we stopped tiles short of where they would overlap with the new section, the old section, and we'll let that go for the time being. We have another area we'll show you in a minute that we're going to work on, but the tile is done. We're not going to grout it for now because we don't have to. We want to make sure that everything downstairs is screwed in tight. The floor joists are the original floor joists. They were okay. They're nailed in place. I'm going to throw a whole bunch of extra screws in there just to make sure everything is nice and stiff. We don't have any bounce in the floor. After the cabinets go in, then we do the grout. I'm not going to rush on that because when we put the grout in, we're going to kind of lock the tiles in place. And if there is any bounce in the floor, we don't want to have any cracking. So there's no big rush. The tile's down. That was the important thing. So that's all set. What I've done is I described on the earlier program. We've come in further than we need to, and somewhere in this project is a tape measure. I don't know where it is, but it's here somewhere. The cabinets are going to come out 24 inches. So here's 24 inches right here. But that's the face of the cabinet. We have that toe space that I mentioned last week. That's back about 3 inches to around 21. So you see I still have another almost 4 inches that we're going to overlap when we put the cabinet down. Because I was able to just be really sloppy with this last tile. We just cut it big. And we allow some space for the cabinet to have something to sit on. And then in the back where it's against the wall, we'll shim it up so everything will be nice and level. These tiles are not perfectly flat. Each one, I showed you last week, here's some scraps of ones that we've cut. You can see better now. Look at the difference in thickness there. And look at that. Yikes. So that's what happens when you deal with some natural product. So, and we were able to work with that, but just the thickness, you know, we've got not quite, well, it's a good 1/16 of an inch anyway. And from this end to this end is more like an eighth, that's an eighth of an inch there. So from end to end on these tiles, we've got all that natural variation. But it was fun to work with, and you know what I think is going to happen, where this is a sedimentary rock, I think if these aren't matched up perfectly, you can see here there's already some flaking taking place. They're going to wear down and they're going to match up really nice at some point. You got to love this. This is why we do rustic stuff, because it will serve us well and will hide a lot of our boo-boos. I'm very happy with the way the underlayment's gone down. Everything is stuck really well. I've been doing a little steps here and there, about an hour and a half each day to get everything covered and keep traffic patterns okay. So that's worked out well. But we still have a couple other things we need to do to get ready. Now, on the walls, we're going to tile the backsplash. I think we're going to get some kind of granite tile to do the sink, the countertop. And we're going to do the backsplash like we did on our last project house because it's simple, it looks great, and it looks nice. I mean, I like the way it looks. So we're going to do it, and it's inexpensive. That was the big thing I was trying to go for. A couple of bucks a square foot, not a big deal. But we have areas where we will not have granite on the backsplash, and that's going to be an area right here. The kitchen stove is going to be here. Over there where the refrigerator is going to be, we're going to have to paint this wall. So this here we don't have to tape because this will all be either behind cabinet or behind tile. But over here will not. So what I've been doing is I have a bucket of joint compound, and I have to open it up. There we go. And what's nice about using this for holding the joint compound is you take the compound out of the bucket, you put it on here, and if you get this contaminated with anything, as I just will try to do here in a moment, it's not in the bucket. And if there's hard granules of dry joint compound, it doesn't get in there where you go to get it later on and then it makes a big mess when you go to try to use it. And the reason I say that is because before I took this out, I should have just gone over this and just scraped down. If I was a really good sheetrock drywall person, there wouldn't be the need to scrape this down because I would have done it so elegantly that there would be no high spots. But when I do it, there's always high spots. So we scrape it down. And then we just go over all the joints, fill in any air bubbles that might have shown. Not going to be that high up there, but we'll just go right down. And what we're going to do is just try to fill in a lot of this. This is a 6-inch knife. 6-inch knife's a good one for applying the compound. And I just amuse myself with this because it gets wider and wider, and I continue to try to feather the edge. And somebody who knows what they're doing would do this in probably 2 applications. It takes me about 3 or 4 hits to get it close, and then there's the sanding afterwards. But it's that's what happens when you don't do this every day of your life. The rest of that looks fairly decent. So we're going to set that down. And when we come back, we switch from the what is that? The 4-inch to the 10-inch. Oh boy, is there ever a reason to stay through the commercials? This has got to be it. Stay with us, we'll be right back. So I've gone over everything, applied with the small knife. Then I go over the joint with the big knife and try to bridge all the gaps that I left from the last time I did this and feather all the edges. And my ultimate goal here is, of course, to have everything nice and smooth, but even more importantly is to minimize the amount of sanding I have to do and try to make what I do look halfway professional. So if you see it on TV, or worse yet, you come in person, you say, you know, he has a little bit of a clue. Of course, you know better because you're watching the show. But you know, again, it's just a matter of technique, and the more you do it, the better you are at it. And I find as I do these projects, the further into them I get, the better they look because I just am doing it for a while. So I use 2 knives so I can just continually scrape off anything that builds up on the small one or big one, and then I go back to the hock here and do another one. And one thing we have here, they gave us, when I ordered sheetrock for this project, they gave us moisture resistant sheetrock. That's why it's blue. It's not normally white like it is over on the other wall there. See, it's white. They gave me white for that wall and gave me blue for this wall. It actually worked out well because this wall is the wall that will see the moisture. So we want to, I guess, have the moisture-resistant sheetrock over here. So that was like something that was planned out. Anyway, we just keep plugging away, and we make all the joints nice and clean, and everything becomes wonderful. That's for regular flat seams. When we get to corners, we have a little bit different approach. We go and we do, I'm back here in the corner where it's nice and dark, but we do about the same thing. We apply both sides, and we get some material on here. Let me get a little bit more, Mr. Cameraman. You can see I'm jumping the gun here. I've got the special tool for doing the corners, and we just get a lot of material in there. And it's not perfectly flat because you can't guide this into the corner without nicking it from one side or the other. So you get a corner trowel, and then we just go in and we put a little bit of pressure on that, and we can just go over that several times to get a nice smooth corner. And then of course with the smaller knife we can go and clean it up again and just reapply down here, and then I try to feather outside of that joint, or maybe I should have feathered. And what we do is just work it a little bit while we have some open time. We get a nice corner. Now, the saving grace here is there is a cabinet across the top here, and there's a refrigerator in the corner, so actually I could get pretty sloppy about it and you would never see it, but I take a little bit of pride in my workmanship, and we want to make sure that it's fairly flat and smooth, and that'll work well. Anyway, that's basically what we need to do for applying joint compound. After we apply it, we then need to sand it. And if I untangle everything here, I get my finishing tools, and we'll take a look at what we can do. I'm just scouting around here to see where, we don't even have to cut, because everything here, yes we do, because not everything is under the sink. I try to keep everything under the sink, and I missed one. So let me just go grab what I'm missing, and we'll show you a couple of quick shortcuts. So I found what I was looking for, and that was this, my sanding block for drywall. And this is the traditional way that you clean up drywall, is you sand it, and you make tremendous amounts of dust. I have a friend who I've hired to do work for me in the past, and he's done drywall, and he doesn't use this. This is primitive. He uses a random orbital sander. And Mr. Man, let me tell you about dust. It gets into everything. I don't like doing either of these if I can avoid them. To be honest with you, I usually sand, but there is another alternative, especially where you're working right in the kitchen, and you happen to have a big sponge conveniently located right next to the kitchen sink. We just saturate the sponge, and I like the sponge, this one is well worn, that has a little bit of a Scotch-Brite surface, and we just wet the surface down. And we can actually feather the drywall just by rubbing it. And you see, here it's a little bit lumpy right here. See how that is? By just rubbing it back and forth, look what happens. It softens the edge and feathers it at the same time. And it takes the material that it softens and moves it around. It actually makes that fairly smooth. And when that dries, and it dries pretty quick because this is really porous material, we can go around and there's no dust. And I've done this for years. And where it's a big fat sponge like this, we can actually go ahead and squeeze it a little. Now that's a little bit thick there, so I might just go with this abrasive side, which isn't very good. Or maybe let that set up a little bit and just sand that a little bit where it's real thick. But these modest edges that don't need a lot of sanding, a lump right there. God, I'm sloppy when it comes to drywall. And we can clean that up. That looks pretty smart. That's nice stuff. You know what? That's not going to show through when we go to paint it. Usually I have a bucket with me here. The kitchen sink is right there, so I might just use the kitchen sink so I can endlessly change the water. And we just go ahead and we work it. And we lose the clock. Clock was right there. I caught it with my foot, so I did not break it. This is the joy of being a clod and having big feet. You can catch the clock before it breaks. Put the clock back up so you know what time it is. And where it's a little thick, I can just, I go ahead and do whatever I can do. I come back and hit the high areas, make a little bit of dust. You can also, the other thing we can do, where did I put it now? I just had it here. Where did I put the sander, camera person? This is why I have two hammers on the job. Did anybody see where I put the sander? Here it is. All right. I didn't want to have to cut the film. We could take this and we can wet it. Many of these are made to be wet sanders, and we can do this thick area the same way. And we can wet sand that edge down because this is water-based material. Of course, once you start wet sanding, you then fill up all the pores of this, and you either have to, well, the best thing to do if you want to use this for anything other than wet sanding is go ahead and change out the piece of paper because it's pretty well shot. But that works well. Anyway, that's what that's all about. So what we'll do between now and when the cabinets arrive is get the little bit of sanding we have to do done. We're still struggling with a paint color for this room. We're going to get that chosen, and if we're really lucky, we'll paint these areas. This wall is the critical wall. We don't so much have to worry about these walls over here where there's no cabinets, but where the cabinets are going to be, it would be nice, not mission critical. There's a cabinet here and it ends right here, I think. It'd be nice to have that edge painted, so we can just set the cabinet over the painted edge, much the way we were doing on the tile floor, where we're going to just have this rough edge here that doesn't have to be precise, and we just set the cabinet right over it, and people look at that and say, wow, that's nice and crisp. Same thing here, we don't have to cut in any edges by doing it this way. So that's the plan. We're sticking to it, and if we're lucky, we'll get that done before the cabinets arrive. There's a snowstorm in the middle of all this, so we'll see how everything lines up. But all the flooring's done, so all I need to concentrate on now is this one wall. And not even the whole wall, just the area where the cabinets are going to be, if I really had to get something done in a timely fashion. But speaking of timely things, we need to take a quick break, take care of a little bit of business, and we'll look around for something else to do because it's a fun day. We should be doing something, right? And we're down in the basement now because we got some time to kill, and we can catch up on what I've been doing down here. I don't know if you notice a difference or not, but it's wide open spaces. The cameraman just said it looks like a nightclub down here, and it kind of does. It's dark and it's roomy by comparison. We've got the carrying beam out over here. We've got the new post in, and I've been slowly putting things back together. And I stopped for a reason, because I realized that as I was rehanging the wiring, that some of these wires just aren't right. They don't have proper grounds, or they have no grounds, and I wasn't happy with the way things were laying out. So I came to a command decision here, and that is that I had alluded to the fact we were going to do something about the wiring, and if I march back here where it gets nice and dark, we don't have enough light, this panel has got to go. And what it's going to do is it's going to go over here, I think, and we're going to put a couple of posts in to the floor, and we're going to mount another electrical panel there. And as we get back over to the light now, and we get tangled up in all kinds of cool stuff, what we're going to do is we'll jump from the old panel to a new panel through a couple of breakers, and we'll run all the small load wiring. That'll be the just outlets, basically, into the new panel. And when we get to a point that we need to make the change, we'll bring an electrician in and have him swap over the service entrance to the new panel. We'll lose the old panel. And in the process of doing all this, we're going to run all new wiring. So you see there's stuff hanging everywhere, and there's some new stuff and some old stuff. We really need to clean this up more. This is a fantastic wintertime project to be working down in the basement, cleaning up the wiring. And I'm just pleased that we're at the point we're at where It's cold out and I don't have any outside cold projects to do. The heat works, and we do have a number of projects to do down here, so we'll get that done. Things seem to be drying out down here as well. I guess with the heating season and things are freezing up outside, there's not water coming in through the walls, so things are getting a little bit drier, and this is relative now. This is a wet basement, but relatively speaking, it's drier than it was, and I'm happy about that. And then we'll deal more with the water issue come springtime. The other thing we've been doing, it's been a pet project of mine. I've got all this wood that we've taken out. These are old floor joists that have come out, and I'm cutting them up into firewood because most of them, you know, if they do have some rot, it's only at the ends. So we can cut them up into chunks about this big. I bring them over to home and we beat them into little pieces with a splitting maul in the basement, and we burn it in the wood stove. And my wife says that I do these projects just so we have firewood through the winter, because I usually use scrap wood from these projects as opposed to buying firewood, because we don't use much firewood. So where we are from here is where we stopped. We've got the new carrying beam and the new post. It's the second one that we put in. We have the old wood tied to the new carrying beam. There was an old beam here. Let me get the right side. It was on this side. We took it out and we put the floor joists in. So that's all nice and solid now. From here over, we're just going to go over these. These have already been screwed in, and we're just going to make sure that everything has ample fasteners to make it real secure. And we actually go back one more bay and we'd be under the kitchen. And why don't we just swing right around here and take a look at that while we're down here anyway. And this end, now I'm standing right underneath the kitchen. The refrigerator's right here, the stove is right here. Here's the cable for the stove right on the side of the joist. New wiring is going in there. And we're just going to screw all these. These are mortised in place. We're going to screw them as well, just so everything is nice and stiff. We're running about 2 foot on center here, so that's not bad, and I have no reason to think we need to do much more than that in terms of beefing this floor up. It's pretty solid. The wood is a little bit big. It's 2.5 by something more than 6 inches, more like 7. Maybe it's even an 8. No, it's not an 8. But anyway, so we got a lot of meat down here to hold up the floor, and we'll just make sure it's all solid and we'll be in good shape. And then we don't have to worry at this point about taking any more rotted wood out. So that's a good thing. And we can start running wire and not have to think about unhooking it. Also, we can start thinking about hooking all our heat up more permanently. Right now, things have been kind of just tacked in place here and there. So we want to clean that up as well. So just things like that that we can do all winter long to get the project done. Not the least of which is related to the heating system over here. We have a boiler mate for our new boiler that we haven't hooked up yet. So we've got to make, we're going to, I think, pour a little pad for this. And I don't want to leave it right here because we need room for cleaning the, when it comes time to clean the oil burner. So we'll probably make a separate pad for that, get that all plumbed up as well. But that, again, another wonderful wintertime project. And speaking of wintertime projects, we're into the heating load, heating season about not quite halfway at this point. And we've used about 150 gallons of oil in this house, maybe a little strong. So that's not horrible. I suspect that the house, as it presently stands, with a little bit of insulation retrofitted, will run about 400, maybe 500 gallons. If we continue to pick away at it, we'll do better. And we'll continue to do that as we get into some other projects. But the plan is that we get the kitchen done so the people who live here can get settled in, and then we can take a more casual approach at getting the wiring hooked up, get this hooked up. Then come springtime, we'll get more big projects going again because there's a lot of things on the outside we'll need to do. At any rate, wintertime, good time to do all this inside stuff, as I say, and it won't take a lot of time. And I think what we'll do is just keep working on it through the winter and showing you what it's all about. If you have any issues or questions, we'll be showing you a lot more detail as we get into the kitchen, and obviously give us a call on the radio if you have any questions. And just a couple of things, you know, when we do the kitchen, we have to do this stepped approach. We had to do the floor first, we have to do the walls first, make sure all the wiring is done, because once the cabinets are up, it gets very difficult to do all these things. So that's all been done. We've got everything out of the way. The mechanicals, the heat, the plumbing, the wiring is all in place. The drywall's in place, a little bit of sanding to do. If we get the paint up, so much the better. And then we're ready for cabinets. So the cabinets are coming next time. It's going to be big time fun here on the TV show. Make sure you catch it, and we will see you next week. Production support for Hot and Cold is brought to you by American Solar Technics, manufacturers of components for wood burning and solar heating systems.